husband teaches high school, and his current senior class has this one girl who's had a crush on him ever since freshman year. She leans over his desk when talking to him and invites him to come look for herself when she asks if she has supplies for the class. When he reported it, the school admin investigated him because they couldn't fathom a male being the victim in a sexual harassment case. But then 2 months after the school year started, Sabrina started showing at the places we were at. First, the Saturday farmers market. Mr. K, she screamed, running at us in extremely revealing clothes about my essay in reference to something he'd never assigned. Then she signed up to our gym the next week, somehow always coming at the same time as us, always needing the same machines, the same weights, accidentally spilling water on her chest in front of us. Then it was the coffee shop, bookstore, even the trail where we walk our dog. My husband showed me her emails asking where he'd be for emergency homework help. We were both completely creeped out. Our picnic at Riverside Park was for my husband's 40th birthday, was supposed to be safe. This spot was our secret, where he'd proposed, where we went every birthday. 40 minutes from town, middle of a Thursday when she should have been in school. But there she was, walking straight toward our blanket in this sundress that was way too provocative not to be accidental. I didn't tell anyone we'd be here, my husband whispered, showing me his emails immediately. She sat down uninvited on our blanket. Mr. K, I need help with my college essay. She touched his knee, but he jerked away, moved closer to me. Sabrina, this is inappropriate. You need to leave. She completely ignored him, kept talking about application deadlines while eating our strawberries. Saw the 40 candles I'd packed and giggled. Someone's birthday? I could give you a great present. She licked her lips. When we packed up to leave, she grabbed his wine glass and drank from it, leaving bright red lipstick marks. Make a wish, Mr. K, she winked. We practically ran to the car. The next morning, I found black lace underwear in his car's back seat. My husband went pale. He pulled up the dashcam footage immediately. There was some girl at 2 a.m. in a black mask, slim jimming the lock, placing them carefully where I'd see them. We went to the police, who said they'd look into it immediately. Suddenly, Sabrina vanished from school. Medical leave, the counselor said. On top of that, she also stopped showing up to the gym, stopped sending him emails about assignments. We heard nothing for over 2 months. We thought it was over. But then on a random day in February at a grocery store, I saw her. I grabbed my husband's arm and pointed at her. She had a baby bump. Small, but definitely there. She made eye contact with us, then him specifically, and blew him a kiss before placing her hand on her belly. I couldn't help but feel uneasy. Is she actually pregnant? I whispered. My husband was hesitant to respond and just moved us along. I saw her again 1 month later, and this time her bump was bigger. This time she walked past us, putting on a show as if she was mad at my husband for something. I couldn't understand. Even stranger, when she reached for cereal on a high shelf, her bump didn't move right. It was too rigid. Could her bump be fake? I asked. He didn't respond, just stared at her with his confused expression. At home, he claimed she was just mentally ill. The next day, we went to the police with everything. The dash cam, again, the stalking incidents, photos we'd taken, but they said they'd already looked into her a few months ago, and without direct threats, there was nothing they could do. By May, Sabrina looked 7 months pregnant. When the wind caught it at the Memorial Day parade, I swear I saw edges underneath, like padding, but everyone else bought it. Parents whispered, teachers avoided us. We changed everything. New gym, new stores, different routes to work. I picked him up from school every day. We were never apart. Our friends believed us once we showed them the evidence, but we were exhausted. Documenting everything. Photos, logs, witnesses, living in constant fear of what she'd claim next. We even got a lawyer who said we needed direct threats for a restraining order. The marriage counselor said we were handling it perfectly, staying united, but I could see it wearing on us. We installed cameras, started looking at houses in other districts. My husband couldn't even go to the bathroom at school alone. He'd have another teacher stand outside. Our anniversary dinner was the one thing that we were looking forward to. Fancy restaurant downtown, reservation under my maiden name. We told no one. But when we walked in, there she was, eating alone at the table next to ours. We tried to change tables, but the rest were taken. We tried to just leave, but before we could, she stood up. How could you do this to me? The couple next to us looked up from their menus. My husband froze. Sabrina, you got me pregnant and now you won't even answer my texts. Her voice carried across the entire restaurant. Conversation stopped. A waiter heading our way turned around. She clutched her enormous belly with both hands, sobbing harder. You promised you'd leave her when I turned 18. You said we'd be together. That's not true, my husband said. Everyone here needs to know that's not. 9 months, she wailed. I've carried your baby for 9 months and you can't even send me a birthday card. She fumbled in her purse, then pulled out an ultrasound. Had his name written across the top in Sharpie. Our baby, due in January. The elderly couple at the next table was shaking their heads at us in disgust. We're calling the police, I announced, pulling out my phone. She stumbled toward the door, then turned back, suddenly calm. Room 237 at the Riverside Motel. Ask about last Tuesday. The next morning we sat in Detective Rivera's office showing her the 3 videos I'd taken on my phone, her pen moving fast across her notepad as she wrote down every detail about the fake ultrasound with Marcus's name in black marker. She played the restaurant footage 4 times, zooming in on the ultrasound Sabrina waved around, pausing when the Sharpie writing was clearest. Rivera pulled up Sabrina's file on her computer, adding our videos to what looked like dozens of other reports, then explained that we finally had enough for harassment charges, but the fake pregnancy claim made everything way more complicated. She assigned a patrol car to drive by our house twice each day starting immediately, which made me feel both safer and more scared at the same time. At home that afternoon, Marcus completely fell apart in our bedroom, sobbing that he couldn't teach anymore if everyone thought he was some kind of predator who got a student pregnant. I held him while his whole body shook, feeling his tears soak through my shirt as he kept saying he'd worked so hard for 15 years just to have it all destroyed by a lying teenager. The phone rang at dinner and Principal Thornton's voice came through the speaker demanding Marcus take administrative leave immediately because 3 parents had called about the restaurant incident. Marcus tried explaining, but Thornton cut him off saying the union rep wasn't available until Monday, so he had no choice but to stay home starting tomorrow. I grabbed my laptop and posted in our neighborhood's private Facebook group asking if anyone else had been at the restaurant and witnessed what really happened. Within 2 hours, 6 different people commented that Sabrina's whole performance seemed totally fake and rehearsed, with one woman even saying she saw Sabrina checking her phone for timing right before standing up. That night, I couldn't sleep at all, getting up every 20 minutes to check the door locks, my heart racing every time a car drove past our house. Marcus pretended to be asleep, but I felt his muscles tense up whenever headlights swept across our bedroom window. At exactly 7 the next morning, someone pounded on our front door so hard the whole frame shook, and when I looked through the peephole, Laura Walsh was standing there waving papers and screaming that we'd destroyed her daughter's life. She kept yelling about stress complications and medical bills while I dialed 911, and Marcus grabbed his phone to record everything from the living room window. 2 police cars showed up within 10 minutes and gave Laura an official trespassing warning while Detective Rivera watched Marcus's recording on his phone. Rivera pointed out that Laura never actually said Sabrina was pregnant, just kept talking about complications which could mean anything. My sister called from Chicago that afternoon, begging us to come stay with her for a while until this whole mess got sorted out. Marcus refused to leave our home of 12 years, saying we hadn't done anything wrong and shouldn't have to run away, which turned into our first real fight since this nightmare started. Attorney Brooks reviewed our huge folder of evidence the next day, saying we had a really strong case for defamation and stalking but needed $5,000 as a retainer to get started. I emptied our entire vacation savings account right there in her office, watching 2 years of planning for Hawaii disappear into legal fees. Brooks said she'd start working on the case right away, but warned us this could take months. We left her office feeling broke, but at least like we were doing something. The next morning, we needed groceries, so we went to Walmart early to avoid crowds. Marcus was grabbing milk when 3 teenage boys walked up to us. "Hey, that's the pedo teacher!" One of them yelled loud enough for half the store to hear. The tallest one pulled out his phone and started recording while another threw a full soda can that hit Marcus in the shoulder, exploding sticky orange liquid all over his shirt. Why would Sabrina suddenly appear at their secret picnic spot 40 minutes from town on a Thursday when she should be in school? Does she have some kind of tracking on them? Security came running, but the kids had already taken off toward the exit. The manager took us to the back office where we watched the security footage showing the kids had been filming even before they approached us, like they'd planned the whole thing. We filed a police report, but the officer just shrugged and said teenagers pull pranks all the time. Back home, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his laptop updating his resume while I tried to work from my home office. Neither of us talked about what we both knew was happening, that we might have to leave town completely and start over somewhere else. I kept checking my phone every few minutes, unable to focus on the spreadsheet in front of me. Monday morning, my phone started blowing up with texts from friends sending me screenshots. Sabrina had posted a TikTok video sobbing about how her teacher had been grooming her since freshman year. The view count was already at 50,000 and climbing fast. Brooks called within an hour saying she was working to get it taken down, but screenshots were already spreading across Facebook and Instagram. The video showed Sabrina crying into the camera, mascara running down her face, holding what looked like an ultrasound photo. Tuesday morning, the teachers union rep showed up at our house with Principal Thornton for a meeting. Thornton sat on our couch admitting he had zero evidence of any wrongdoing, but said the optics of the situation meant Marcus had to stay on administrative leave while they investigated. The union rep filed a grievance right there from our living room, but warned us it probably wouldn't help much. That afternoon, while Marcus was in the shower, I went through Sabrina's social media accounts and found something weird. She had 3 different profiles with 3 different versions of her story. One said the baby was due in December, another said January, and the third said February. Each account had different details about when their supposed relationship started. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to Brooks immediately. Wednesday morning, Marcus's mom called crying, asking if what she'd heard from her neighbor was true. Marcus could barely get words out to explain, so I took the phone and walked her through everything while he sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. She believed us, but I could hear the doubt in her voice when she asked why a teenage girl would make all this up. Detective Rivera called that afternoon with bad news. The prosecutor wouldn't pursue charges because Sabrina hadn't made any direct threats against us. Apparently faking a pregnancy and stalking weren't enough without explicit threats of violence. I threw my phone so hard against the wall that the screen cracked. Brooks filed for an emergency restraining order the next day and got us a hearing for the following Thursday. She warned us it would be hard to get one approved without evidence of direct threats or violence, but said we had to try anyway. When I went back to work on Monday, I couldn't focus on anything. My supervisor noticed me staring at my computer screen without typing for 20 minutes and gently suggested I take some personal days to deal with whatever was going on. I realized then that this poison was spreading into every single part of our lives. Thursday morning, we drove to the courthouse for the restraining order hearing. Sabrina showed up with her mother and a lawyer, wearing loose clothes and holding her belly like she was really pregnant. When the judge asked why she was there, she said she was actually afraid of Marcus and needed protection from him. The judge shuffled through papers for what felt like forever, while Sabrina's lawyer stood up and started talking about how my husband had taken advantage of a vulnerable student. He held up photos from the restaurant and said Sabrina was just a desperate pregnant teenager, trying to get the father of her baby to acknowledge what he'd done. Brooks jumped up with our evidence folder and spread everything across the table in front of the judge. The dashcam footage played on his laptop showing Sabrina breaking into our car at 2 a.m. He showed the emails she'd sent asking where Marcus would be for emergency homework help and the gym surveillance of her following us around. The judge kept writing notes and asking questions about dates and times. After 2 hours of this back and forth, Sabrina took the stand and started crying immediately. She told this whole story about Marcus giving her special attention since freshman year and how he'd promised to leave me for her. Brooks asked her for specific dates when this happened and she got all confused and couldn't answer. He asked who else saw them together and she just kept crying harder. When he asked why she was at Riverside Park during school hours, she claimed Marcus told her to meet him there but couldn't show any texts or emails proving it. She said he must have deleted them from her phone somehow. The judge finally called a recess, and when we came back, he said he was granting a mutual restraining order. Neither of us could contact or go near Sabrina, and she couldn't contact or go near us. Brooks stood up and argued that we were the victims here, but the judge said without criminal charges, this was the best he could do. We walked out to the parking garage in complete silence. Marcus suddenly turned and punched a concrete pillar so hard I heard the crack. His hand swelled up immediately and 2 of his fingers were bent wrong. I drove him to urgent care without saying a word because what was there to say? The nurse cleaning his hand asked if this was a domestic violence situation, and we both started laughing in this bitter way that made her step back. She wrapped his fingers and gave us discharge papers while avoiding eye contact. A week later, I was planting flowers in our front garden when I noticed footprints in the dirt by our windows that weren't ours. I called a security company that same day and had cameras installed all around our house. The tech installing them mentioned we were his 5th teacher family this year dealing with student problems. That night, I found Marcus in his home office at 2 a.m. just staring at lesson plans spread across his desk. He hadn't moved in hours, and when I touched his shoulder, he whispered that he didn't know who he was if he wasn't teaching. The next morning, Brooks called with news that made me scream so loud, our neighbor's porch lights clicked on. Sabrina's lawyer had sent a settlement demand saying if Marcus admitted to an inappropriate emotional relationship and paid $50,000, she'd drop everything. I threw my phone across the room and it shattered against the wall. Later that day, I went deep into Sabrina's social media accounts going back years. I found posts from 2 years ago where she'd claimed another teacher was obsessed with her and wouldn't leave her alone. That teacher had transferred to another district right after. I screenshot everything and sent it to Brooks immediately. Marcus's dad drove down from Minneapolis the next day without us even asking him to come. They sat on our back porch with beers, and his dad told him about being falsely accused of stealing money from his job 40 years ago. He said, "You just survive it. That's all you can do. You just survive it and wait for people to forget." Marcus started crying for only the second time since this whole nightmare began. 2 weeks passed before Brooks forwarded us the school board meeting agenda with Marcus's name listed under personnel matters. She said they couldn't legally fire him yet, but they were building a case and our attendance was required. The meeting room was packed with parents sitting in metal folding chairs that scraped against the floor every time someone shifted. During public comment, 12 parents stood up one by one to speak about Marcus. 8 of them demanded he be fired immediately, reading from prepared statements about protecting their children. 4 parents defended him, including one mom who said her daughter was in his class, and this was clearly a witch hunt. Sabrina's mother Laura stood up last, waving that fake ultrasound photo above her head, while people in the back rows craned their necks to see. The board members sat there taking notes and said they'd table the decision pending further investigation. That night I couldn't sleep, so I started searching Facebook for any information about Sabrina's past. I found a post from 3 years ago mentioning another teacher at her old school and tracked him down through LinkedIn. He responded to my message within an hour, and we talked on the phone for 2 hours. He told me Sabrina had done the exact same thing to him, fake pregnancy and everything, but his wife had left him and he never fought back because he thought no one would believe him. Marcus started seeing a therapist who specialized in false accusations the next week. When he came home from his first session, he sat on our couch and admitted he'd been thinking about killing himself. The therapist put him on something called a safety plan, where he had to check in twice a day and remove all the guns from our house. 20 days after the restraining order was issued, I was on the treadmill at our gym when I saw Sabrina walk through the front doors. My hands were shaking as I called 911 while she claimed she'd had her membership longer than we had. The manager pulled up the security footage right there in the lobby, and it showed she'd joined 2 days after the restraining order was filed. The cops arrested her on the spot, and she screamed the whole time they were putting her in handcuffs. At her arraignment the next morning, she showed up without any pregnancy padding at all, completely flat stomach in a fitted dress. Her lawyer stood up and claimed she'd miscarried due to the stress we'd caused her. The judge set bail at $5,000, and her parents paid it immediately. Marcus's dad dropping everything to drive down from Minneapolis with beer and wisdom about surviving false accusations from 40 years ago? That's the most dad move in the history of dad moves. When I got home that afternoon, I found Marcus at the kitchen table with his laptop open to teaching positions in Canada. He'd already contacted 3 schools in Ontario and had an interview scheduled for next week. I stood there looking at the screen and realized he'd completely given up on clearing his name here. I didn't try to stop him because honestly, I was thinking the same thing. Detective Rivera called the next day with interesting news about that ultrasound photo. She'd had their tech guy analyze the metadata, and it was downloaded from a pregnancy website 6 weeks ago, not from any medical office. She said she was building a case for filing false police reports, and this was exactly the kind of evidence she needed. I was putting groceries in my car at the store when Laura walked up and started screaming at me about causing her daughter's miscarriage. I asked her loudly enough for other shoppers to hear which pregnancy she meant, the one from May or the one from January, since the timelines didn't match up. People stopped loading their cars to stare at us, and Laura's face turned red before she stormed off. That night, Marcus and I sat at our dining table eating leftover Chinese food in complete silence. We'd run out of things to say that weren't about Sabrina or lawyers or court dates or evidence. I tried to remember the last time we'd had a normal conversation about movies or weekend plans or anything else. Nothing came to mind. The phone rang while we were washing dishes, and Brooke's name showed on the screen. Marcus put him on speaker while I dried a plate. Brooke said 2 other families wanted to join a civil suit against Sabrina because she'd been harassing their teenage daughters online, and one family had screenshots of her threatening their kid. We set up a meeting for the next week. 3 days later, the school board finished their investigation and decided there wasn't enough evidence against Marcus, but still recommended he stay on leave for student safety. His union rep called within an hour to say they were filing a lawsuit for defamation and wrongful suspension. The paperwork would take weeks, but at least someone was fighting for us. That weekend, I was supposed to meet my best friend Jessica for coffee, but she texted saying she couldn't make it. When I called, she finally admitted her husband thought where there's smoke, there's fire, and didn't want her hanging around us anymore. I hung up and deleted her number while sitting in my car in the coffee shop parking lot, crying for an hour before driving home. Marcus found me still in the driveway and just held me. A week later, Brooks called again, saying a psychiatrist named Dr. Cross had contacted him, suggesting we subpoena Sabrina's mental health records. The doctor couldn't say much because of patient privacy, but kept saying the records would be really helpful for our case. Brooks started the paperwork that afternoon. 6 weeks after the restaurant incident, the subpoenas for Sabrina's medical and psychiatric records went through. Her lawyer fought it hard, but the judge approved it because of all the fake pregnancy claims. We waited another 2 weeks for the records to arrive. Meanwhile, I woke up one morning to Marcus standing at our garage door with his phone out taking pictures. Someone had spray painted Predator in huge red letters across it. The security camera showed a figure in black, but the face wasn't clear. When the cops came, they found a matching paint can in Laura's garbage 2 houses down, but couldn't prove she did it. Marcus started spending his days at the library volunteering to teach adults how to read. The first day, one student recognized him from the news and walked out, but the others stayed. He came home that night looking happier than he'd been in months, talking about this older man who was finally learning to read bedtime stories to his grandkids. I tried to hold on to that happiness, but the next morning, our mortgage refinancing got denied. The loan officer pulled me aside and quietly said it was because of our situation, even though our credit was perfect. All our plans to fix up the house and maybe move somewhere new just fell apart. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived from Brooke's office, the psychiatric records. I sat at the kitchen table reading while Marcus paced behind me. Sabrina had been in treatment for borderline personality disorder since she was 14. The file documented 3 other incidents with teachers at different schools. One middle school teacher had to transfer districts. Another got a restraining order. A high school math teacher quit teaching completely. Her parents had been warned multiple times about her behavior patterns. Each incident followed the same pattern of obsession, false claims, escalation. The psychiatrist's notes described elaborate fantasies she'd created about relationships that never existed. Marcus grabbed the papers and kept reading. There were emails her parents had sent to therapists begging for help, saying they couldn't control her anymore. Hospital admissions for self-harm when teachers rejected her advances. Pages and pages showing this wasn't new. Brooks called an emergency hearing for the next morning. The judge spent an hour reviewing everything, her face getting more serious with each page. She read out loud about Sabrina's pattern of obsessive attachment to authority figures and creating elaborate false stories when rejected. The judge ordered an immediate psychiatric evaluation and temporary restraining order while we waited for the full hearing. 3 days later, my phone buzzed while I was making dinner, and it was one of my husband's former students calling from college. She said 20 other kids from his classes over the years had signed a letter of support, and the student newspaper was running it on the front page tomorrow. My husband sat at the kitchen table reading their messages on his laptop while tears rolled down his face, and his hands shook so bad he couldn't type replies. The next morning, Laura showed up at the school demanding to withdraw Sabrina, but the secretary explained that Sabrina had turned 18 2 weeks ago and refused to sign the withdrawal papers herself. That afternoon, Brooks forwarded us an email Sabrina had sent my husband at his school account, saying you can't escape our destiny with a bunch of heart emojis and links to wedding venues. Brooks immediately sent it to the detective handling our case as the direct threat we'd been waiting for to strengthen the stalking charges. 2 months after the restaurant incident, the police finally arrested Sabrina at her house at 6 in the morning, and her bail was set at $25,000. Laura screamed at me me outside the courthouse steps that I'd ruined a sick child and tried to grab my purse, but the bailiff stepped between us and told her to move along or face charges herself. That weekend, we drove 2 hours to attend a support group for families dealing with false accusations and met 6 other couples going through similar nightmares with students or coworkers or neighbors. For the first time in months, we sat in a circle of folding chairs in a church basement and didn't have to explain or defend ourselves because everyone there already understood. The school board meeting happened the following Tuesday, and they voted to reinstate my husband with full back pay once the criminal proceedings concluded, but 3 members still voted against it. Principal Thornton pulled us aside afterward and mumbled an apology about how the situation was handled, but refused to put anything in writing or say it publicly. The psychiatric evaluation results came back showing Sabrina had been off her medication for 6 months, and her psychiatrist testified at the hearing that she was fully capable of understanding consequences but actively chose elaborate fantasies over reality when faced with rejection. 10 weeks after the restaurant scene, the prosecutor offered Sabrina a plea deal for 2 years probation with mandatory psychiatric treatment and a permanent no-contact order if she publicly recanted her claims. Her lawyer looked exhausted as he explained the terms to her family and strongly recommended she accept to avoid potential jail time. The next day, I found my husband hyperventilating by the Cheerios in the grocery store cereal aisle where we'd first seen Sabrina with her fake pregnancy bump. An elderly woman asked if he was having a heart attack while I rubbed his back and helped him breathe into a paper bag from the cashier until his hands stopped shaking enough to stand. Brooks filed a civil defamation suit seeking $200,000 in damages for the harm to my husband's reputation and career. Sabrina's family immediately countersued, claiming my husband had encouraged her attention through special treatment in class, though they had zero evidence to support it. Then came the call from the prosecutor that made my stomach drop because Sabrina had rejected the plea deal and insisted on going to trial, claiming she had proof of their relationship. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to quit right there in the conference room as she rambled about destiny and true love while the trial date was set for 3 months out. I went back to work the next week and tried to pretend everything was normal, even though I could feel everyone watching me. My boss gave me easy projects at first, and people smiled too much when they passed my desk. 2 weeks in, I walked past the break room and heard the new interns huddled around a phone whispering my name and reading something about the restaurant incident. They jumped when they saw me and shoved the phone away, but the damage was done. Marcus found an online teaching job with a state university that let him work from home and record lectures in our spare bedroom. Setting up his little studio with a green screen and ring light gave him something to focus on besides the mess our lives had become. There's something odd about Dr. Cross suggesting they subpoena those mental health records when patient privacy laws are so strict. Makes me wonder what exactly prompted that doctor to reach out. His first lecture was about the American Revolution, and I watched from the doorway as he came alive again talking about history and answering student questions through the chat. When he finished and saw me standing there with tears running down my face, he just pulled me into his arms and we stayed like that for a long time. 3 months crawled by with depositions and meetings with the prosecutor until one morning Brooks called to tell us Sabrina had violated her bail conditions. She'd created a website called Mr. K Truth.com filled with fake emails and photos she'd edited to make it look like Marcus had been meeting her at hotels. The police arrested her that same day at her apartment, and the judge revoked her bail immediately. Her lawyer filed to withdraw from the case the next week, citing irreconcilable differences, which basically meant even he couldn't deal with her anymore. The court appointed a public defender who immediately asked for a psychiatric evaluation to see if she was even competent to stand trial. While we waited for all the legal stuff to grind forward, Marcus's mom came to stay with us for a week. She didn't ask questions or try to talk about what happened, but just cooked meals and helped us repaint the garage door that still had faint traces of graffiti. She planted sunflowers along the fence and waved at neighbors until they started waving back. One afternoon, I found Marcus on his laptop looking at houses for sale in our neighborhood instead of the Canadian job listings he'd been browsing for months. When I asked about it, he said maybe we didn't have to run after all and squeezed my hand while we looked at a little blue house 3 streets over. His nephew's wedding was that weekend and we almost didn't go, but his sister begged us to come. Half the relatives pretended we weren't there while the other half hugged us extra tight and told us they were praying for us. Marcus gave a toast about how love means standing together through storms, and everyone knew exactly what storm he meant. The psychiatric evaluation came back saying Sabrina was competent to stand trial, which meant this whole thing was really going to happen. During her transport to court, she told the officers that Marcus had gotten her pregnant twice and forced her to have abortions both times. The officers wrote it all down in their report, even though there was zero evidence, and the prosecutor said it was just more of her escalating lies. 4 months after that disaster at the restaurant, the trial finally started with 3 days of jury selection. Brooks sat with the prosecutor going through notes while they asked potential jurors if they'd seen anything about the case online. Marcus would have to testify about everything, and so would I, and worst of all, Sabrina would get her chance to tell whatever fantasy she'd convinced herself was true. The prosecutor's opening statement laid out 18 months of stalking and harassment with dates and evidence and witnesses. The defense attorney claimed Sabrina had mental health issues, and that Marcus had sent mixed signals that confused a vulnerable young woman. The jury took notes and stared at Marcus, and then at Sabrina, who sat there in a conservative dress looking nothing like the girl who'd shown up at our anniversary dinner. Marcus took the stand first and spent 4 hours going through every single thing that happened. He showed the court hundreds of emails Sabrina sent him, each one getting more intense than the last. The prosecutor had him read some out loud where she asked him to meet her places and offered to do his grading if he'd just talk to her alone. He explained how he never responded to any personal ones, only replied about homework with other teachers copied on the emails. He showed the logs he kept of every time she showed up where we were, the gym records showing she joined the day after seeing us there, the coffee shop workers confirming she'd ask when we usually came in, security footage from the bookstore showing her following us through the aisles. Under cross-examination, the defense lawyer asked if he'd ever been nice to Sabrina. Marcus admitted that freshman year, when her dad died in a car accident, he'd let her eat lunch in his classroom because other kids were being mean to her. He said he felt bad for her and tried to help her through a tough time. The defense lawyer jumped on this, suggesting maybe Sabrina misread his kindness. Marcus stayed calm and explained that being kind to a grieving 14-year-old didn't mean he wanted a relationship with her. I testified next about everything I witnessed, showed the photos I took of her fake pregnancy belly when the wind caught it wrong. The prosecutor had me describe finding the underwear in our car and watching the dashcam footage of her breaking in. The defense lawyer tried to make me look jealous, asking if I was threatened by a pretty young woman paying attention to my husband. I actually laughed out loud at that. Told her I wasn't threatened by a teenager who had to break into our car to plant evidence. The judge had to tell people in the gallery to be quiet when they started murmuring. Then Sabrina's psychiatrist took the stand and things got really interesting. She testified about Sabrina's history of creating false narratives when she felt rejected. Revealed that in middle school, Sabrina had claimed a similar relationship with her female English teacher, complete with fake love letters she wrote herself. The teacher had to transfer schools even though an investigation proved it never happened. The psychiatrist explained Sabrina hadn't been taking her medication for over a year. Her mom had stopped making her take it because Sabrina said it made her feel fuzzy. The prosecutor entered all our evidence next. Security footage from the gym showing Sabrina always arriving right after us. The dashcam video of her breaking into our car. Restaurant footage showing her whole performance about being pregnant. They put up her social media posts on a big screen, showing how she'd claimed different due dates in different posts. One post said she was 6 months pregnant in March. Another said 4 months in the same week. The jury took notes and kept looking over at Sabrina. When Sabrina testified, she stuck to her story that everything was real. Said Marcus seduced her, got her pregnant, then abandoned her. When the prosecutor showed her the conflicting posts, she claimed Marcus made her lie to protect him, but she couldn't provide a single text or email where he asked her to do that. She said they deleted everything to hide the evidence. Under cross-examination, things fell apart fast. She couldn't explain how she knew about Riverside when Marcus had never told anyone at school about it. Couldn't produce any gifts he supposedly gave her. Couldn't name one single time they were actually alone together. When asked about the motel room she mentioned at the restaurant, she said she meant a different motel. Started crying, but the jury didn't look sympathetic at all. During lunch break the next day, we sat outside on a bench. Marcus turned to me and said he forgave her. Not for her sake, but for his own peace of mind. Said carrying anger was too heavy. I wasn't there yet and told him so. He said that was okay, that we all heal at different speeds. We didn't talk about the case, just sat there eating sandwiches and watching people walk by. Laura took the stand that afternoon and immediately started crying about how Marcus had seduced her baby girl. The prosecutor asked for evidence. Laura said Sabrina's emotions were all the proof she needed, that her daughter wouldn't lie about something like this. Then the prosecutor showed Laura's own text messages to Sabrina, begging her to take her medication, threatening to have her committed if she didn't stop this obsession. Laura tried to say those texts were taken out of context. The prosecutor read one out loud where Laura wrote that she knew Sabrina was lying and needed help. The courtroom got really quiet. Closing arguments took forever. The prosecutor laid out the pattern of stalking, the evidence, the lies, the history of false claims, showed how Sabrina had escalated from following us to breaking into our car to making public accusations. The defense argued mental illness, said Sabrina was confused, that teenage girls often misunderstand attention from teachers, said Marcus should have been more careful with a vulnerable student. The jury went to deliberate at 4 in the afternoon. 6 hours later, they still hadn't reached a verdict. Judge sent them to a hotel for the night, told them to come back in the morning. That night, we couldn't sleep at all. At 3 in the morning, we gave up and went out to sit on our porch. The stars were really bright and we just stared at them. Marcus mentioned maybe getting a second dog, a friend for our beagle. I talked about planting tomatoes this year instead of peppers. We both knew we were just pretending everything was normal, but what else could we do? The sun came up around 6 and we drove back to the courthouse in silence. The jury filed in and wouldn't look at Sabrina, which our lawyer said was a good sign. The judge asked if they'd reached a verdict and the foreman stood up with a paper shaking in his hands. Guilty on all counts. Felony stalking, felony harassment, filing false police reports, making false statements. Sabrina jumped up screaming that Marcus had ruined her life and this was all his fault. Her mom Laura started shouting about appeals and how they'd fight this. The judge banged his gavel hard and told them both to sit down or be removed. 2 weeks later, we were back for sentencing and the prosecutor asked for the maximum jail time. The defense lawyer asked for probation with psychiatric treatment instead. They let us read our victim impact statements. Marcus talked about losing his identity and becoming someone people cross the street to avoid. Sabrina's mom testifying that her daughter's emotions count as evidence while the prosecutor pulls up texts of her literally begging Sabrina to take her meds. That's some world-class parental denial meeting reality in the courtroom. I talked about the fear that followed us everywhere and how we couldn't even go to the grocery store without looking over our shoulders. The judge took a long break before coming back. 1 year in county jail, 2 years probation after that. Mandatory psychiatric treatment for the whole time. Permanent no contact order with both of us. She'd have to register as a convicted stalker. Laura collapsed crying in the gallery while Sabrina just stared straight ahead. Outside the courthouse, Marcus and I didn't celebrate or smile or anything. We just held each other in the parking lot. Brooks walked over and said the civil suit would probably settle now that she had a criminal conviction. Some justice, but not complete justice because nothing could give us back the last year. A month after the trial, the school board officially reinstated Marcus with full back pay and a public apology. He'd go back next semester to finish the school year. Some parents showed up to protest at the board meeting, but most people supported him now. His reputation was damaged, but slowly recovering. His first day back teaching was rough. The classroom was only half full and some kids looked at him with suspicion, but his former students from before all this started showed up to support him. He kept the door open the whole class and made sure he was never alone with any student. The civil suit settled 3 months later for $50,000 from the Walsh family. It barely covered our legal fees, but the money wasn't the point. We put what was left into savings for all the therapy we'd both need. I deleted all my social media accounts because I couldn't handle seeing posts from Sabrina's supporters who still thought this was some conspiracy. Some people would never believe the truth no matter what evidence we showed them. We had to learn to live with that reality. One day a letter came from the county jail with Sabrina's prisoner number on it. Laura must have sent it pretending to be her. I burned it in the backyard without reading it and never told Marcus it existed. Some boundaries had to be permanent now. 8 months after that night at the restaurant, we had our final meeting with Brooks at his office. All the legal matters were done. The restraining orders were permanent. Sabrina had served 6 months before being transferred to a psychiatric facility for treatment. The system had worked, slowly and imperfectly, but it had worked. 3 weeks later, Marcus came home with an envelope that his hands shook opening. Inside was an invitation from his former students for a dinner at the community center next Friday. We walked into a room with 40 people standing and clapping when we entered. One by one, they came up and hugged him, telling quick stories about how he'd help them with college essays or listened when their parents divorced. The local paper took photos and ran a piece about teachers making real differences in students' lives. The next Tuesday, we sat in a therapist's office for our first session together. She handed us worksheets about rebuilding trust, and we filled them out while sitting on opposite ends of her couch. Week after week, we came back, doing exercises about touch and safety and learning to sleep without checking locks 3 times. Marcus started holding my hand again during movies, and I stopped flinching when someone walked behind me at stores. We talked about moving to a different state, but decided that would mean she won. Our real friends had stood by us, and this was our home. The grocery store clerk smiled at us again, and parents at school started making eye contact. Marcus signed up to speak at the district's teacher training about recognizing obsessive student behavior. He made a PowerPoint with warning signs and handed out packets about documentation. 20 teachers came up afterward to share their own stories about students who'd crossed lines. Our anniversary came exactly 1 year after that awful restaurant night. We went to a different place downtown, and nobody looked at us twice. The waiter brought our pasta, and we ate it while talking about normal things like the new deck we wanted to build. 2 months later, I stared at a pregnancy test showing 2 pink lines. We sat at the kitchen table debating whether to tell anyone given everything that had happened with fake pregnancy claims. Marcus posted the ultrasound sound on Facebook anyway, because we refused to be ashamed of real joy. Comments poured in with hearts and congratulations from people who knew our whole story. Marcus went back to teaching his full schedule, and some parents requested their kids transfer out of his classes. He signed the transfer papers without arguing because rebuilding trust takes time. Every normal day where nothing bad happened felt like winning. We heard through the district that Sabrina was living with an aunt in another state and getting treatment. We didn't look her up online or ask for updates because that door needed to stay closed. Our energy went into painting the nursery and picking out cribs instead of checking security footage. Friends threw us a baby shower in our backyard where those footprints had scared us 2 years ago. The garden bloomed with roses I'd planted to reclaim the space as ours. People brought tiny clothes and diapers and nobody mentioned the past. The security cameras were still there, but we only checked them when packages arrived. 7 months later, I gripped Marcus's hand in the delivery room as contractions hit. He coached me through breathing while nurses checked monitors and adjusted my IV. Our daughter arrived at 3:47 a.m., screaming and perfect with Marcus's eyes and my nose. He held her against his chest in that hospital room, singing the same song his mom had sung to him as a baby. The past 2 years felt like something that happened to different people in a different life. We'd survived by choosing truth over lies, patience over panic, and staying together when everything tried to tear us apart. This tiny person we made was proof that real life wins over someone else's fantasy every single time. Thanks for letting me tag along on this one. Definitely been a bit of a ride. Until next time, subscribe for more content like this.